and welcome once again to Region Weather Live, your YouTube source for weather across the Dakotas and Minnesota. I'm meteorologist Brad Warner with an update on this storm system that's moving into our region right now. So let's not waste any time. Let's go on and take a look. And there you see all the rain moving into the area. I'm recording this right around 8:30 at night Central Time. And now that rain making it to Duluth, beyond Fargo, just kind of starting to make it up to Grand Forks. Some of these numbers you're seeing in here are the gusts that are associated with this system at this point. So we're seeing gusts of 25 to 30 miles per hour along with all this rainfall. And of course, as you can see, the update going on up here, we've got a couple of watches and warnings going on where we've got a winter storm warning here across north central parts of North Dakota, a winter storm watch for areas just east of there. And just south and west are winter weather advisories there in the purple. And this little yellowish area down here in South Dakota is a high wind warning in effect until Wednesday at 5 p.m. where we're looking at northwest winds 30 to 40 miles per hour with gusts up to 60 miles per hour possible across this region. And so there's the latest look at the latest watches, the warnings, and just where we're at as far as the precipitation goes. As you notice a little bit out in the west, we still don't have any snow just yet, but it's starting to creep up into Montana just a bit. It's taken a little bit longer than previously expected, but don't you worry, that snow is definitely on its way. And so we are expecting that snow through the overnight hours to come into western parts of North Dakota, and that rain continuing to move northward overnight. Now, as we get to about 6 a.m. or so, again, the rain across much of Minnesota, eastern parts of the Dakotas, perhaps tapering off just a little bit here across southern parts of Minnesota by this point into Tuesday morning. And then that snow line pushes a little bit further east as we get into the morning. Now, the one thing I kind of mentioned yesterday is that dividing line, that changeover from rain to snow. Once we get this area and through here, usually has a fair amount of lift with it. So if you start to turn over to snow, more than likely right away, it's going to be moderate to perhaps some of these areas in the Devil's Lake Basin or just the far northern parts of North Dakota could be heavy at times as we get through the later parts of Tuesday morning. So keep that in mind that once that rain does transition over to snow, or once that snow begins, it could start off rather potent. And then once we get into Tuesday afternoon, that snow pushes into northwestern parts of Minnesota at this time. Again, much of northern parts of North Dakota, eastern North Dakota, kind of in that snowy area already, reaching down into northeastern parts of South Dakota as well. Otherwise, that rain now begins to wrap up and move to the northeast and kind of exits out of northeastern parts of Minnesota. So that's kind of interesting. As you see that system eject off to the north, it's carrying that rain along with it into Canada. And then on the back side of this, in the cold air coming back out of Canada, is the snow, the cold air that wraps around the back end of this system. So we get to 3, 4, 5, and 6 p.m. Again, that snow continuing across much of North Dakota and northern Minnesota as well as we begin our evening hour time frame on Tuesday evening. So now, along with that snow that moves across North Dakota, portions of South Dakota, northern portions of Minnesota as well, we're also going to be dealing with some stronger winds. This is a Tuesday morning, and then around noontime, and as we get into the afternoon and evening hours on Tuesday, strong northwesterly winds begin to push into the Dakotas, particularly western parts of the Dakotas, 45 to 50 miles per hour. That's kind of where that high wind warning is down into parts of South Dakota basically begin to take shape. Now you also notice some of these winds pushing a little bit further to the east. So these strong northwesterly winds begin to move into eastern and northern parts of North Dakota. So while some of that stronger snowfalls will be in the morning hours to perhaps early afternoon, the winds in some of these areas that are really going to be getting hit as far as snowfall goes, we'll back this up a little bit, actually doesn't come in until more so the afternoon and evening hours. So we get the heavy snowfall at first. We continue with the light snowfall as we get into the Tuesday evening hours, but also once we get into Tuesday evening and Tuesday night, the strong northwesterly winds kick up even more. So more than likely road conditions are just going to deteriorate through the overnight hours Tuesday night as those winds kick up. Now by midnight Tuesday night, and then we get to 3 a.m. and 6 to 7 a.m., we see that snow not quite as heavy as it was before, but that cold air definitely continues to sink to the southeast. So along with that, we're going to stretch that snow down to the south and east as well. And so some more snow across northeastern parts of South Dakota, perhaps even getting as far eventually as portions of the Twin Cities, maybe even a few flurries across far southern parts of Minnesota as well. Not really expecting much for accumulation down here, maybe a trace or so, but nevertheless, you could see some snow as we go through the day on Wednesday. Now, as we get into Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening, most of that snowfall begins to taper off. We really dry up, and by this point, pretty much the storm system is over. About the only thing we're going to be left with, yet again, is going to be the winds. And of course, on Wednesday, we continue to see the strong northwesterly winds, 35, 40, maybe 50 miles per hour, perhaps even stronger as we begin the day on Wednesday across portions of South Dakota. So again, make sure everything across central and western parts of the Dakotas, if you have anything that need to be tied down, make sure it's tied down. If you're a truck or an RV moving through that area, be very, very cautious because, man, it is going to be very nasty out across western parts of the Dakotas. And again, that high wind warning where they're saying maybe even 60 miles per hour across portions of South Dakota. Now, as we get into the evening hours, Wednesday evening, and get into Wednesday night, and finally by Thursday morning, you can see the winds shift over into Minnesota. So not by the time we get into Thursday morning, most areas across Minnesota really aren't seeing a whole lot of snowfall, especially in these areas where we're seeing the wind gusts as we get into Thursday morning. So 35, maybe 40 mile per hour winds, but like I said, shouldn't really cause much of a concern as we're not really expecting much in the way of snowfall in those regions. And as we go through the day on Thursday, those winds continue to diminish. And especially as we get into Thursday evening and Thursday night, those wind gusts finally move on out. All right, and here's the updated snowfall map from what I've got. Not a whole lot different other than this light blue area. I've just got a trace to 1 inch of snow possible within these regions. So you can see once again, much of Minnesota and into portions of South Dakota, southwest North Dakota, not really seeing a whole lot in the way of snow. Now, as you get into the darker blue here, we're looking at roughly 1 to 3 inches along with this little patch here just west of Devil's Lake. And then as we get into the purple areas here, we're starting to see pick up in that 3 to 6 inch mark. And then possibly as we get up into Botno and Lake Metagoshi, we're looking at 6 to 12 inches up here in the far north, perhaps even a little bit more, we'll see. But boy, this is going to be the big problem area for the most part, given the amount of snowfall and then the winds that begin to move in later in the day, Tuesday into Tuesday night. Now, looking at the winter impact map, once again, these areas in orange is probably going to be the greatest hit. That's going to be the areas where roads are just going to be nasty. Visibilities are going to be down. You're going to get plenty of snow up there. So really do use caution if you're traveling across these portions of North Dakota. Areas in yellow, while they don't pick up quite as much snow as this area in the far north, eventually you do get a fair amount. I mean, you could get 2 to 3 inches of snow, and then given the amount of winds that are still associated with it in through here, where you could be getting 20, 30, maybe even 40 mile per hour wind gusts. Of course, that's going to be plenty to cause drifting, some blowing, and to make those roads slippery at times in some of these areas across this portion in yellow. And then I also included another area in green. And in particular, this area across the Red River Valley here, this will come maybe a little bit later, maybe more so Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. It just depends on how much snow exactly some of these areas get. But as the winds do kind of ramp up in here, it seems to have a propensity to just cause some lower visibilities, to cause those roads to drift. And so I wanted to make sure and include something in here just because it just seems like this area in particular is just prone to bad weather conditions if there's any kind of snowfall, if there's any kind of wind. And then also as we get a little bit further to the south and just to the southwest of the yellow mark. You know, if you get some of these areas in particular and through here, the winds are really, really going to be howling. So, of course, we get even a trace to an inch of snow. I mean, that could be enough at times, just depends on how, given the timing of things, to reduce visibilities, to create some bad travel conditions, to create some slippery roads across that parts of North Dakota and South Dakota. And as I have shown you already, once again, those storm warnings, winter storm warning in through here for tomorrow across parts of North Dakota, winter storm watch, and a winter weather advisory in through here. Map also indicates wind advisory across a good portion of central portions of South Dakota and North Dakota, as well as on the North Shore along the Arrowhead region of Minnesota. Now, given we're going to be seeing some pretty good winds as this system wraps in through the area, we're going to be seeing some pretty good east to southeasterly winds coming off that lake, bringing with it plenty of precipitation, bringing some high winds with it. And of course, they're also talking about some of these areas in through here, just having some of those streams and rivers having some higher flows given the amount of rain that's expected across northern parts of Minnesota. In fact, if we take a look at the precipitation forecast, now this is just liquid precipitation through Wednesday. So this is by Wednesday night. Boy, we're looking at 1 inch to 1.5 inches. Maybe we'll see some areas perhaps can see 2 inches across west central parts of Minnesota. But again, those areas across the Arrowhead just off the North Shore, 2 to maybe 3 inches of rain, perhaps even upwards of 4 inches of rain in some localized areas. So those rivers are going to be roaring across the North Shore here as by the time this system is all said and done up there. But boy, you know, most of Minnesota really, we're looking at rain for the most part. So gosh, this is just really, really good moisture for a good chunk of Minnesota and into eastern parts of the Dakotas. Well, there's your latest as this system moves on in through our area. Now, for those of you across eastern parts of the Dakotas into northwestern parts of Minnesota, keep in mind that you're going to be starting off with rain, and then eventually that cold air begins to sag on into the region. So perhaps some of those roads, given the rain and then the cold air coming in, maybe a little bit of snow to really cool things off, could create some localized slippery conditions. Even if you don't get a whole lot of snow, given the cold air come in, perhaps some of those roads could get a little bit of ice on them. So do use caution if you're moving across or you're traveling across the northern parts of our region Tuesday on into Wednesday. Now, eventually by Wednesday night, Thursday, pretty much everything, all this snow and the rain and the wind have moved out of the area, and then we get a few days break. We may have another little system, a quick hitter coming in late into the weekend, into next week. We'll see exactly how that pans out. Way too far out there to say for sure, but just something to kind of think about as we get into next week. So make sure, if you haven't done so, hit the subscribe button down below, hit the little bell button that pops up beside it. That way you're notified when I've uploaded a video just like this, and you too can stay informed on the latest winter conditions across the Dakotas and Minnesota. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit the thumbs up button down below. That helps my video get noticed, and other people can also see the latest weather conditions across our region. All right, everybody, for Region Weather Live, I'm meteorologist Brad Warner. Everybody, have a good day.